Hello everyone, how's your day? In this chapter, we're going to look at lifespan development. We will be talking about our growth and changes over time across the lifespan. So let's imagine that we step into a time machine and we're going to go through a journey from the very beginning of life until the last stages. And along the journey, I encourage you to think about your own experiences and observations because lifespan development is not just theories or concepts. It's about our real life experiences that shape who we are. So, are you ready? Let's start. Now I'm going to give you an introduction to the module. In this chapter, we're going to look at several things. So first, we are going to talk about prenatal development, which is the time before babies are born. And then we will look at emotional development. How do babies develop their emotions? And how do they regulate their emotions? And after that, we will look at attachment, which is the emotional bond between caregivers and the babies. And then we will turn to another topic, which is cognitive development, with the focus on Piaget's stage theory. And then we will talk about morality, how we develop our moral, and the different concepts. Then we will move on to adolescent and emergent adults to look at their features and characteristics. And lastly, we will look at adulthood and aging, which is the last stage of life. And after you watch the video, please remember to take the Week 2 quiz to complete the module. And there are several objectives in this chapter. So first, after you watch this video, you will be able to understand the stages and the processes in prenatal development. And along the way, you will be able to identify the emotional and the social development across the life stages with the focus on attachment and morality. And then you will be able to understand cognitive development by looking at Piaget's stage theory. And we will also talk about morality, so you will be able to understand how we develop moral reasoning. And then we will look at adolescents and emergent adults to focus on their features and their characteristics. And lastly, you will be able to understand the changes and the challenges that we may have later in our life. Now our journey will start with prenatal development, which is the time before babies are born. Before babies are born, the pregnancy usually lasts 9 months, and there are 3 stages during this time, including germinal stage, which is from 0 to 2 weeks, and then embryonic stage from 2 weeks to 2 months. And the last stage is the fetal stage from 2 months to birth. And there are a lot of things going on during these 3 stages. And now we're going to look at these 3 stages one by one. Let's start with the first stage, the germinal stage from 0 to 2 weeks. So during this time, our life begins. The egg and the sperm combine together to form a zygote. So the egg is fertilized in a fallopian tube, and then it divides several times as it moves toward the uterus. And then implants into the uterine wall, forms the placenta. And that is how our life begins. And this stage also includes the separation of the 3 germ layers, which will later develop into our major organs. So this is the first stage, germinal stage. And next, we will move on to the second stage, the embryonic stage, which is from 2 weeks to 2 months. This stage is of great vulnerability because we're developing the major organ systems. If anything happens during this time, the effects could be devastating. It's a very important stage. During prenatal period, the third stage is the fetal stage, which is from 2 months to birth. So during this stage, our bones and muscles begin to form, and our body continues to grow, and now we're preparing for birth. Well, sometime between week 24 to week 25, the age of viability is reached. So what does that mean? That is, the babies are able to survive outside the womb. In other words, the fetus is able to survive if born prematurely. And sometime around week 26 to week 28, the survival rate will be 85% if the babies are born prematurely. So this is the third stage, the fetal stage. The fetus during the prenatal period is vulnerable, and the fetus is in the womb. So the mom is the environment, and the environmental factors can have long-term effects on the fetus. So now let's look at the environmental factors. Well, studies have found that severe maternal malnutrition can have long-term effects on the baby. So if mothers have severe maternal malnutrition, babies are more likely to have schizophrenia and other psychiatric disorders as they grow up. And mothers' emotions also play a role. If pregnant women are sad or anxious, or if they are depressed most of the time, then their babies are more likely to have problem behaviors after they are born. In addition, if mothers use substances during pregnancy, then their babies are more likely to have some problems. For example, if pregnant women use alcohol, then their babies are more likely to have fetal alcohol syndrome. Studies found that these babies are likely to have deficits in their IQ, and they will also show some delays in their development, which might influence their attention span, their reaction time, and they're also more likely to have problem behaviors after they get older. So as we can see, the fetus is vulnerable, and all the environmental factors can have long-term negative effects on the baby. So that is the prenatal period. Now our time machine is going to the next step. Now babies are born. So we're going to look at emotional development in infancy. Well, do you think that babies can tell us their feelings? Well, babies cannot talk because they haven't developed their language. And that's why emotional expression is very important for them. So there are some basic emotions that babies have right after birth. Let's look at those basic emotions. So first, babies show their smiles after birth, and later they show their social smiles. Social smiles means that they will smile at their friendly faces. Studies found that babies have a preference for human faces, especially their mom's faces. And it is believed that their moms are usually their primary caregivers. That's why they have their preference for their mom's faces. They can spend a lot of time staring at their mom's faces. And then during this time, they also have laughter. It's usually associated with their curiosity. In addition to happiness, babies also have anger. They show their general distress after birth, and then later they show their anger. It's usually related to the removal of the things that they like. Additionally, babies also have fear. So babies have their fear because they're separated from their caregivers, or they see something that they are afraid of. And during this time, babies have stranger wariness. That is, later in life, they no longer smile at the friendly faces. So that's why we can see that some babies may cry when they see Santa Claus because they are not familiar with the old guy with the white beard. And later, they also show the stranger anxiety. That is, when they are separated from their caregivers, they may cry, they're anxious. And that's a term that we will talk more about later in this chapter. Lastly, babies also have sadness, especially when they're separated from their caregivers. And it's also related to the increased production of their cortisol. So these are the basic emotions that happen during the first few months in our life. But then you may ask, do babies have these basic emotions right after birth, or do they have to learn in the environment from their parents? Well, there has been a debate, but the answer is both. So, nature and nurture. Do you remember those two terms? We have talked about them in the first module. So it means genes and environment, and both are very important that can contribute to our basic emotions. Well, now researchers generally agree that both can contribute to our emotional expression. According to the discrete emotions theory, our basic emotions seem to be biologically programmed. For example, crying. Crying seems to have the same meaning across culture. We know crying means that the baby is hungry, or the baby is hurt, or maybe the diapers need to be changed. So it seems to have the same meaning in different countries, in different cultures, and it shows up at about the same time for all the normal babies. So according to this theory, our basic emotions seem to be biologically programmed. They are innate. However, nurture also plays a role. So how? Well, researchers believe that the environment, such as parents, can also shape how babies express their emotions. For instance, happy baby. So we know, okay, here's the happy baby, and the happy baby smiles a lot. Then what would happen to the parents when the baby smiles? We know when the baby smiles, parents might say something like, "Oh, look at the baby. She's smiling, she's so cute." And they will hug the baby. Then what will happen next? Well, the baby would know, okay, if I smile, my parents will hug me. So I will smile more often and they will come to me more often. So in this case, parents' responses can further shape how baby express emotions. And this is the nurture part. So we can see that both nature and nurture are important in shaping how babies express their emotions. Then next, let's look at secondary emotions. Now we know that babies have basic emotions during the first few months of life. But then later, as they get into 18 to 24 months old, they also show some secondary emotions. And these emotions include pride, envy, embarrassment, guilt, and shame. But why are they called secondary emotions? Well, they are not innate. Babies or toddlers have to learn these emotions from parents or from the environment, from the culture. For example, studies found that some Asian cultures are more shame-prone. That is, Asian parents are more likely to use shaming as a technique in their parenting and their socialization with their children to teach them what is right and what is wrong. So Asian children are more likely to feel the feeling of shame when they violate the norms. So we can see that these secondary emotions are shaped by culture or by the environment. That's why they're called secondary emotions. Next, let's look at social referencing. What is social referencing? Social referencing means that babies can look at the social cues in the environment and then they can regulate their own emotions. So let's see, maybe there's a baby, and this is the first time that the baby sees the doctor. The baby is confused. Well, where am I? And what should I do? And then the baby might be a little bit scared. So the baby might look at the mom. And the mom might say, "Oh, no worries, sweetheart, you're safe. And everything's gonna be all right." So the baby will know, okay, everything is fine and I'm safe. So the baby can look around the surroundings, search for the emotional cues, and then the baby will understand that, okay, everything's fine, to regulate his or her own emotions. And that is social referencing. Social referencing is well established around 10 to 12 months old, and babies during this time will be better regulating their own emotions because of the social referencing. Next, let's look at emotional regulation. So it's important for us to know how to regulate our emotions. For example, we know that when we get older and older, we gradually learn how to regulate our emotions. Like if we're angry, we know that we cannot just show our anger directly. We have to kind of manage our negative emotions and try to hide it. Or for another example, maybe you receive a gift from your grandma and, well, you don't like the gift, but you have to say, oh, thank you, Grandma. I really love this gift, although you don't like it. So we have to regulate our emotions, and we gradually learn how to do it as we get older and older. But how do children learn emotional regulation? Well, they learn emotional regulation through the interaction with their parents and with the other people as they get older and older. So it's through socialization. And it grows over the first year with brain development that they will have better understanding of how to regulate their emotions. In addition, if we want to regulate our emotions, we need affective control. But what is affective control? If we want to do affective control, we have to inhibit our emphasis. We also need to manage and regulate our negative emotions in order to behave acceptably. Well, for example, maybe now imagine that you're in the classroom physically and you're hungry, but you cannot just get out and get some food. So what can you do? You have to inhibit your emphasis to get out and to find some food. And you also need to manage your negative emotions. You're kind of anxious. But you have to manage your emotions in order to behave acceptably as a student in the classroom. And that needs affective control. And another example is the famous experiment called the marshmallow study. And I'm sure that many of you have heard of that study before. So in the marshmallow study, it's like, let's pretend that I'm the researcher, and then there's some children. So I would tell the children, okay, so here is the marshmallow, and you can eat it right away. But if you can wait, okay, I'm going to do something, and then when I come back, if the marshmallow is still here, then you can get one more marshmallow. So then children have to wait. They have to pass the time. They have to do something. They have to inhibit their emphasis to eat the marshmallow right away and manage their emotions in order to get one more marshmallow maybe 10 minutes later. So that is the famous marshmallow study. And now you can pause this video and watch the video clip of marshmallow study to learn more about this experiment. So now you know what the marshmallow study is. And from the video, we know that children have to do something to distract themselves in order to pass the time and get one more marshmallow. So we can see that to do the affective control, children need to have the sense of the self. They need to know that they are the unique individuals. They are separate from others. And they also need the confidence in themselves to know that they can perform the actions on their own. In addition, they need to have the memories to remember the instructions from the researchers. They need to remember that if I wait, I can get one more marshmallow in order to perform affective control. So that is the marshmallow study and affective control. Next, we're going to look at synchrony. Synchrony is also a very important process during this time for babies and for toddlers. So it's the smooth exchange of the emotions or responses before the caregivers and the babies. So it's an important process for babies to learn the social skills that they need as they get older and older. But how do we study synchrony? Researchers use the still face technique to study synchrony. So in the study, researchers asked the adults or caregivers to have the still face. That means they will have no facial expressions. And soon, babies will realize something is going on. They will be like, what happened? You're not smiling anymore. And so what happened to you? And then we can see that babies become frustrated, and some babies may become sad, they may scream, and they may cry, and they will try to re-engage with their caregivers. That is, babies are able to read their parents' emotions, and then they can regulate their emotions as well accordingly. But what is the still face technique? Now you can watch the video clip for the still face technique to learn more about what it is. So from the video, we know that synchrony is very important for the babies to learn the social skills that they need for the future interaction with others. And through this process, babies are able to read others' emotions, to understand others' feelings and thoughts, so then they can have some strategies to re-engage with others and also to regulate their own emotions. So those are the things that we need to know for emotional development. Now we're going to look at another important topic, which is attachment. What is attachment? Attachment refers to the emotional bond that we have with other individuals. And in this chapter, we focus on the emotional bond, or we say the connection between the caregivers and the babies. So it is evident around 8 months and it solidifies around 1 year old. Attachment in infancy can influence our life a lot. Studies have found that if we have secure attachment during infancy, we are more likely to have positive relationships with other people as we get older. For example, we will have romantic relationship with our partners later in life if we have secure attachment in infancy. But how do we study attachment? Well, at first, there was an animal study with monkeys. So baby monkeys were separated from their moms right after birth, and then they were raised by the substitute moms. So these moms are not the real monkeys. They were the fake moms. And there were 2 types of moms. The first type of mom was made of wire, and food was provided. And then the second mom was made of wood, but it was covered with clothes, and there was no food provided. Then what do you think? Which one did baby monkeys prefer? The first one, wire mom with food, or the second mom, the clothed mom without food? Well, the answer is the clothed mom. So studies found that even though food was not provided, baby monkeys spent more time with the second mom. And what does that mean? That is, contact comfort is more important. So the second mom is covered with clothes and it's more like the real mom. That's why baby monkeys can get the security and contact comfort from the second mom. So contact comfort a more important contributor to forming attachment than the other factors. That is how we started learning about attachment. Then how do we study attachment in human beings? Well, obviously, we cannot give babies a wire mom. But then how do we study this? Well, there was a researcher called Dr. Mary Ainsworth. She conducted the strange situation experiment. So she recruited babies and their caregivers, usually their moms, to the lab. And she asked them to play in the room. So she asked the mom to leave the room and then return. And then she observed the baby's reactions. So now you can pause this video and watch a video clip about the strange situation to learn more about this study. And there are some behaviors that you can observe. So first, please focus on how they play in the room, how the baby and the mom played in the room. And then next, please focus on how babies reacted to the mom's departure, and then how they respond to the mom's return. So now you can watch the video clip of the strange situation. Based on the responses from the strange situation, we can see that babies may have different reactions. And researchers concluded that there are 4 different attachment styles. So let's look at these 4 one by one. First, we have the secure attachment. Well, most of the babies are secure babies, like the little girl Lisa in the video. She was the secure baby. Around 50 to 70% of the babies are secure babies. We can see that children play happily in the room, but when the moms are not there, they're not happy. And when the moms are back, they welcome the mom and then they return to play. Like Lisa, well, she is a happy baby. She's the secure baby. And the second attachment style is called insecure avoidant. Only 10 to 20% of the babies are this style. We can see that children play happily in the room. They're just like the secure babies. However, when the moms are not there, they continue playing. They seem not to care about the mom's departure. And when the moms return, they ignore the mom. They don't care. They continue playing. And they're called insecure avoidant babies. Next, we have the third attachment style, which is insecure resistant. About 10 to 20% of the babies are this style. So you can see that in the playroom, they are preoccupied with their moms. And when their moms are not there, they are not happy. They may stop playing. And when the moms return, they're angry. They cry and they may hit the mom. About 10 to 20% of the babies are this style. And the last attachment style is called disorganized. Only 5 to 10% of the children are disorganized. When they're in the playroom, they're cautious. And when the moms are not there, they may yell, they stare, and they look confused. They're scared in the room. And when the moms return, they may freeze, they may scream, and they hit themselves, they may throw things. So they're not happy. And this is called disorganized. So we can see that based on the responses in the strange situation, we can conclude that there are 4 different attachment styles. And there might be some cultural variations, but generally there are 4 attachment styles as the responses in the strange situation conducted by Dr. Mary Ainsworth. Then what are the factors that may influence secure attachment? Well, there are several factors that may influence how babies form secure attachment with their caregivers. For example, the opportunity for attachment. Studies with Romanian orphanages found that if babies were separated from their parents from a very young age, they were more likely to have some problem behaviors or delays in their development, including their IQ, their social development, and their interaction with others. However, the recovery was rapid once they were adopted. Once they had the opportunity to form the attachment with other people, then they will show the recovery in their developmental outcomes. Then next, quality of caregiving also plays a role. So if parents can provide sensitive caregiving, then their babies are more likely to form secure attachment. Caregiving is important during infancy, and sensitive caregiving means that parents provide sensitive, they respond to the babies consistently, quickly, and appropriately to their needs. If parents can provide this kind of caregiving to their babies, then they're likely to form secure attachment. Then next, babies' characteristics, such as their temperaments, can also influence their secure attachment. Studies found that easy babies are more likely to form secure attachment. We know there are also some difficult babies or slow to warm up babies. These babies might need to take more time to adjust to the new experiences and new environment as they are in the strange situation. So they might be less likely to form secure attachment with their caregivers. And lastly, family circumstances such as poverty or marital difficulties, they can be stressful and they can further influence how parents provide caregiving to their babies. So they could also be a factor. So these are the factors that may influence attachment, especially secure attachment during infancy. Then you may ask, how is attachment related to later development? Well, studies have found that if babies have secure attachment, then they are more likely to have positive developmental outcomes later in life. For example, in a longitudinal study, Researchers follow babies over time. They follow those secure babies. And they found that these babies are more likely to be described as curious and more likely to initiate play activities, and they're usually smarter than the other children when they become students in elementary schools. And also, they're more likely to form friendships as they get older, and they're more likely to have positive romantic relationships with their partners and with other people later in life. But it's important to note that it is the continuity of the positive caregiving that plays a role. So if parents are sensitive to their baby's needs, not only in infancy, but also throughout the way in the development, when their children are in childhood and in adolescence, they are also sensitive to their needs. Then their babies are more likely to have positive developmental outcomes in the future. So it is the continuity of caregiving that may link the secure attachment to later developmental outcomes. So that is about attachment. Now we will move on to cognitive development, and we will focus on Piaget's theory. Piaget made a landmark contribution to the field of cognitive development. Well, he proposed the constructivism. What is that? Constructivism means that children can construct their own knowledge. So children play an active role in their own learning. They construct their own knowledge. Piaget also believed that children use the schema to construct their knowledge. What is the schema? Schema means the mental structure. It's kind of abstract. It's the mental structure that children can use to represent the things that they encounter in their daily lives. And then by using the schema, children can use assimilation and accommodation to learn the things in their world. But what are they? Let's look at some examples. So first, let's look at assimilation. What is assimilation? Let's look at this together. Now there's a dog, and this is the first time that the little girl sees this dog. And she remembers that she always calls her for the pet doggy. So then she will call this a doggy, and that is correct. So she does not have to change her schema. She can use the existing schema to interpret this information, and that is called assimilation. While accommodation is different. So now you can see that there's a cow, and this is the first time that the little girl sees the cow. And she remembers that she always calls her for the pet doggy, so she calls this a doggy. And her mom would say, no, this is not a doggy, this is a cow. So now she has to change her schema to adapt to the new information. And this process is called accommodation. Piaget believed that children can use assimilation and accommodation to learn the things in their world. And this is an important process during this time when children are learning things. Additionally, Piaget proposed the stage theory to describe that children have different cognitive functioning skills at different ages. So now let's look at the stages. Now we're going to look at Piaget's stage theory, and there are 4 stages. Let's start from the first stage. Stage 1 is called sensory motor stage, and it's from birth to 2 years old. This stage starts with the reflexes. For example, babies have rooting reflex, or they have sucking reflex. If we put a finger in their mouth, they will suck the finger. So these reflexes are believed to be related to survival. And then this stage ends with the voluntary movements. During stage 1, babies gradually learn object permanence. What is object permanence? That is, they will understand that things are still there, even if they are unseen. So for example, maybe there's a pen in front of you, and you know that the pen is there. And if you put the pen under the table, you will know that the pen is still there. But for babies during this time, they will look shocked, And because they believe that the pain disappears. And that's why peekaboo is so fun during this time. They cannot understand object permanence. That is the first stage, sensory motor stage. And as the term implies, babies use their senses and their motor skills to understand the world during this time. Next, the second stage is called pre-operational stage, and it's for children around 2 to 7 years old. Now they understand language, so they can use some symbols to represent the things. And during this time, children have centration. That means children can only focus on one thing at a time. They're not able to consider multiple things simultaneously. In addition, children have egocentrism. What is egocentrism? Egocentrism means that they cannot take the viewpoints of others. Let's look at the example. Piaget used this 3-mountain task to understand egocentrism in children. So let's look at this picture together. Here we can see that there's a girl on the left, and then there's a doll. It's not a real girl, it's a doll on the right. And then there are 3 mountains. There's a 3-mountain display on the table. And then on the right, there are 4 pictures, A, B, C, and D. So the researcher would ask the little girl, so now you can see there are 3 mountains in front of you, and there are 4 pictures. So which one is the view that you are looking at from your side? Then what is the answer? Well, we know that the answer is C, because the red flag is on the left and the snow mountain is on the right. And children at this age have no problem answering this question. They would say C. Okay, then next, researchers would ask the little girl, so now you can see that there's a doll in front of you. Then A, B, C, and D. Which one is the view that the doll is looking at? Then what is the answer? Well, we know the correct answer is A. The snow mountain is on the left and the red flag is on the right from the doll's view. But what would children say? They would say C. Why? They believe that the doll experiences the world the same way they do, and that is egocentrism. They're not able to take the viewpoints of others. That's why they think that, oh, you see what I see and you feel what I feel. So that is egocentrism. That's why they would answer that the doll is looking at view C. Then next, stage 3. Stage 3 is called concrete operational stage, and it's for children around 7 to 11 years old. During this time, children can use some symbols and they can do some rotation mentally. However, they cannot complete the conservation text until the end of this stage. What is conservation? Conservation means that they will understand that the properties of the substances remain the same after the simple transformation. But you might still question, what is it? Well, now you can pause this video and watch the video clip about conservation to learn more about it. From the video, we saw the first 2 examples, and these are the common and famous conservation tasks that are used by the psychologists. And let's look at the third example, dance. There are 2 sticks and they are the same. And then we push the second one to the left a little bit. And then we ask children, are they the same as long as each other, or is one stick longer than the other? And children might say, oh, the second one is longer because we just made some changes to the second one. That is, they can only focus on one thing at a time. Or like the last example for math. There are 2 pieces of clay, and then we punch the second one, so now it looks flattened. And we ask children, are they the same, or does one piece have more than the other? And children will believe that the flattened piece has more clay. They will believe that the one on the right has more. And why? because they can only focus on one thing at a time, and they think that you just made changes to the second one, so now it's different and it has more. So that is the important characteristic during the concrete operational stage. Stage 4 is called formal operational stage, and that's the stage for adolescence. Now they can understand abstract things, they can do complex thinking, and they can also do metacognition. So that is the last stage proposed by Piaget. And these are the 4 stages in Piaget's stage theory. Now we're going to turn to another topic, moral development. What is morality? Before we talk about moral development, we're going to look at a moral dilemma. So let's imagine this. Let's imagine that you are the captain of a lifeboat, and the lifeboat is designed to hold only 15 people, but now there are 20 people in the boat. And the boat is going to sink into the extremely cold water and kill everyone, unless several people leave. And remember, you're the captain. You can make the decision. What would you do? Would you throw people off the boat? It's hard, right? But if you say yes, then on what basis would you make the decision about who has to leave? How do you decide whom to throw off the boat? Well, there's no correct answer, and we know that it's hard to make the decision, especially when you are the captain. You are responsible for this. Sometimes in our daily life, we may face some moral dilemma like this, and we have to make a decision based on our moral beliefs. But how do we develop our morality? Well, several researchers have focused on this topic. For example, Piaget. Piaget studied moral development by breaking it down into 2 stages. And he believed that children have 2 stages of moral reasoning. The first stage is called heteronymous moral reasoning, and is from ages 4 to 7. During this time, children believe that the rules come from the authority figures, and they have to always follow the rules. So they believe that there are some laws and rules in the society, and naughty behaviors must always be punished. For example, children at this age might say something like this: "You cannot break the rules. The rules were made by my teacher." The teacher is the authority figure. And they might also say something like, "The rules are made by my mom, by the teachers, or by God." And they have to always follow the rules. That is the first stage. And the second stage is called autonomous morality, and it is reached at ages 10 to 12. So now children understand that there are some rules, but they focus more on the intentions behind the actions as more important than the consequences. For example, so children at this age might say something like this: "I broke the vase by accident, and that wasn't as bad as when James broke it on purpose because he was angry." So we can see that children may view the intentions as more important than the consequences. "Well, I broke it, but it was an accident, so it was okay." However, if you do it by purpose, then that is not acceptable. So we can see that it's different from the first stage. Then later, Kohlberg also had a theory about moral reasoning, and he built his theory on Piaget's framework. He presented the moral dilemma to the participants. The moral dilemma is just like the one that I showed you earlier, that you're the captain. So he asked the participants whether you would do it or you won't do it. But he was not that interested in whether you say yes or no. He was more interested in why. So your reasoning is the key to determining the stage of moral development. And based on the responses from the participants, he concluded that there are 3 levels of moral reasoning, including pre-conventional, conventional, and post-conventional moral reasoning levels. So now let's look at them one by one. The first moral reasoning level is called pre-conventional moral reasoning, and it's for children in early childhood. So now children believe that the behavior is right or wrong based on whether they are rewarded or punished. If they are rewarded, then they will know that this behavior is okay and they can do that again in the future. On the other hand, if they get punished, then they know that it's not okay. So if we present them with the moral dilemma question, you're the captain, and should you throw people off the boat? What will they say? Well, again, whether they say yes or no is not that important. The reasoning is more important. If they say no, they might say something like this: you shouldn't because you might get into trouble. Or yes, you should because if you don't, people will be mad. So here we can see that they focus more on rewards and punishment. You might get into trouble, it's like a punishment. Or people will be mad, it's also like a punishment, so we should avoid that. So during this moral reasoning level, we can see that children focus more on rewards and punishment. Then the next level is called conventional moral reasoning. Now the focus is on the social rules. They know that they have to follow the rules and the laws in the society. And they want to gain the approval from others. They want to be a good girl or a good boy. If we present children in middle childhood with the same question, should you throw people off the lifeboat? What will they say? If they say no, they might say, you shouldn't do it because you'll be a criminal. Or yes, you should do it because you want to be a good person to save lives. Now we can see that they know they have to follow the rules, but they also want to be a good boy or a good girl. So that is the second level, conventional moral reasoning for children in middle childhood. The third level is called post-conventional moral reasoning level, and that's the level for adolescents. Now individuals understand that we all have the personal code of ethics, so the focus is on the ideals. If we present adolescents or adults with the same question, should you throw people off the boat? If they say no, they might say something like this: you shouldn't because every life has value. Or yes, you should because saving more lives is the greater good. So now we can see that they can provide explanations. They can consider different factors to explain why they think we should do it or we should not do it. And that's the post-conventional level. So these are the three levels proposed by Kohlberg based on his experiment, his study with the moral dilemma to the participants. Okay, so now children get older and they move on to adolescence. So now our time machine will go to adolescent development. Well, first, let's look at puberty. Puberty marks the beginning of adolescence. And this word is actually from a Latin word, pubescere, which means to grow hairy. And during this time, well, there are a lot of changes. So puberty marks the beginning. It starts with the first rush of hormones, and then it ends with the full adult development. There are a lot of changes going on during this time. There might be physical changes. We also have the changes in our physiology and also physical appearance. For example, during puberty, people might have growth spurts. Growth spurts means that there are a lot of changes during a short amount of time. For example, I remember when I was around 14 years old, well, I grew a lot in my height. I was from 150 and I grew from 150 to 170 centimeters in 1 year. And that is called growth spurts. We grew a lot in a short amount of time. And there are also some changes in our social relationships, and those changes will continue well into emergent adulthood later. But what is special about adolescence? Well, there are a lot of things going on during this life stage. Well, first, there are a lot of changes. We know there are rapid physical changes And there are also physiological changes and also social psychological changes during this time. And it's a time for adolescents to explore their identities. According to Erikson, the psychosocial crisis for adolescents is identity versus role confusion. They're trying to figure out who they are and what they want to do in the future. And at the same time, they strive for autonomy and independence. They want to know if they can make their own decisions. At the same time, they develop some new capacities and competencies. We know that they enter the post-conventional moral reasoning, and they also enter the formal operational stage. So they have different cognitive skills at this moment. In addition, they have some changing roles in their relationships. They have different roles at home and society, and they're trying to adjust to their new roles as they get prepared for their adulthood. So there are a lot of things going on during adolescence. That's why they're so special, and that's why a lot of researchers are interested in learning more about them. When we talk about Piaget's theory, do you remember the stage 4, formal operational stage? We said that's the stage for adolescence. So now we're going to talk more about this stage. Well, during the formal operational stage, adolescents can now understand abstract things. For example, now they can understand things such as love, justice, or freedom. We know we cannot see them physically in our daily life, but we know that they do exist. So now adolescents can understand abstract things. They can also do complex thinking. They can understand metaphors or sarcasm. And they can also use scientific methods to test their predictions. And they can also understand hypothetical situations. Additionally, they can do metacognition. That is, thinking about thinking. They can monitor their thinking process, which can help them solve problems and think more efficiently, which is an important process during adolescence in the formal operational stage. Next, let's look at social cognition, which is also important during adolescence. And here we're going to look at perspective taking and adolescent egocentrism. So what is perspective taking? That's it. Adolescents will understand that you have your own thoughts and feelings, and I also have my own thoughts and feelings that are different from yours. That is perspective taking. And gradually, adolescents will understand this. They are able to do perspective taking to understand others' needs and wants. In addition, adolescents have egocentrism. Do you remember the term egocentrism? We said children have egocentrism in the 3 mountain task. And now in adolescence, they also have egocentrism, but it's a little bit different. Adolescent egocentrism means that they have difficulties in distinguishing the thoughts about oneself from the thoughts from others. But what does that mean? That is, we can put it simply. Adolescents might think that, oh, I think I'm pretty, I'm cool, I'm special, and I think that you have the same feelings too. You think I'm cool, I'm special. That is egocentrism in adolescence. And now we're going to take a closer look at adolescent egocentrism. We're going to look at imaginary audience. Well, let's think back to the time when you were an adolescent, or maybe you are an adolescent right now. Well, did you or are you spending more time on your hairstyle or your makeup because you think that others are watching you or listening to you? That is imaginary audience, and it's very common during adolescence. They believe that others are watching them and listening to them. They are called audience and they are imaginary. So that's why adolescents want to impress others. And that's an important characteristic during this time. And another related term is called personal fable. Well, why are others watching me or listening to me? Well, then there must be something unique about me, and that's personal fable. Adolescents think that they're so special, they're so unique, that's why others are watching them. And in addition to personal fable, adolescents might have optimistic bias. That is, they have the tendency to assume that bad things, misfortunes, diseases are more likely to happen to others than ourselves. And that's why adolescents are more likely to take risks, such as binge drinking or drug use, because they think that bad things will never happen to them, and that is due to optimistic bias. So these are the important characteristics during adolescence. As adolescents continue to grow, they become emergent adults. So next, we're going to look at emergent adulthood. Well, studies have found that the transition to adulthood has been delayed in many cultures and in countries. But why? Well, now many parents do not view their college-age children as adults. They are willing to support their children. But why? Well, now children do not go to a job market directly after high school. So they prefer to go to college, and they may also go to graduate schools later. And so the extension of education makes the transition to adulthood get longer and longer. In addition, many parents are willing to support their children, their college-age children, financially and emotionally, especially in some Asian cultures or in some collectivistic cultures. But you may ask, why? Well, parents love their children, and they believe that their children are not mature enough to make their own decisions. So they want to be involved in their children's life to show that they care and they love. That's why parents are willing to support their children in many collectivistic cultures. And even after children graduate from college, they may move back to their parents' house and live together. Due to several factors, that the transition to adulthood has been delayed. And also statistics show that a lot of people get married later now. So that's why there's a new term called emergent adulthood to describe those people who are no longer adolescents but who are not adults yet. But what is emergent adulthood? Let's take a closer look at it. Emergent adulthood is a term proposed by Arnott, and he believed that it's the stage for people who are around 18 to 25. But now many researchers believe that we can extend the age to 29. And there are several features for emergent adulthood. Well, first, identity exploration. We know it's the future for adolescents, but now many emergent adults, or we say college students, still have no idea who they are and what they want to do in the future. So we can see that this identity exploration extends to emergent adulthood. In addition, it's the age of instability. Well, during this time, college students may change their major several times, and they may have different part-time jobs as they get prepared for their future career. So their lives are usually not stable at this time. And third, it's a self-focused age. Now, emergent adults focus more on themselves. During this time, maybe they don't that much rely on their friends or peers as compared to the time when they were adolescents. But at the same time, they feel in between. So they're no longer adolescents, but they're not adults yet. They're kind of in the middle, they feel in between. But it's also the age of possibilities. Everything is possible. They have time and they have energy to work for their goals and work for their dreams. So everything is possible. So these are the 5 key features in emergent adulthood proposed by Arnott. Lastly, our time machine is going to the last few stages of life. We're going to look at adulthood and aging. First, let's look at early adulthood. Individuals at early adulthood have some peak experiences at different levels. For example, physically, Many individuals experience the peak performance. We can think of athletes in Olympic Games. Many of the great athletes have the peak performance. They can run fast, they can swim fast, or they can jump high. So we can see that they have the peak of physical performance in their early adulthood. However, this peak does not last long. Well, usually there will be a gradual decline in their mid-30s to their late 30s and into their early 40s. Then cognitively, individuals during this time also have the peak experiences. They can process information quickly, and they also have better decision-making skills, and they can think efficiently. Then socially, some people during this time have to form their new relationship, and some of them are building their families, and some of them are building their career. So we can see that individuals in their early adulthood have peak experiences at different levels. Then in middle adulthood, there will be a lot of changes. So physically, we can see some significant changes. There might be decline in metabolism and muscle mass. But some women might also experience the menopause, which means that they will experience the changes in their hormones. And it's a natural part of their development. But these changes can also be challenging. And that's why it's important to have a healthy lifestyle. Then cognitively, there might be the decline in their memories and also in the speed of their information processing. However, there could also be increase in our knowledge and in our life experiences. Then socially, for individuals in their mid-adulthood, well, they have to parent their teenage children, which is challenging. And as their children get into college, they will experience the empty nest, and which can offer them an opportunity for personal growth. And many individuals during their mid-adulthood experience the peak career achievement. So those are the characteristics for people in the mid-adulthood, and it's the stage for people around mid-40s to mid-60s. Lastly, in late adulthood, there are also a lot of significant changes. So as we move on to the last stage of our life, we know that we can notice that we might not be able to see things clearly, and we cannot hear things clearly, and we might walk slowly. And those are the natural part. Those are the natural changes due to aging. Then cognitively, we also have some changes. There might be some declines in our cognitive functioning due to the normal part of aging. Then socially, many of the individuals during their late adulthood are retired, and now they also have to experience the loss of their loved ones. And studies found that if they can do something meaningful, for example, if people can make connections with their community, such as being a volunteer, then they can have a more satisfying life as an individual in the late adulthood. So these are the stages that we may experience throughout our life. So in this chapter, we cover the different life stages. We take the time machine to go from the first stage, from conception to birth. Then we look at infancy, we look at children, adolescents, emerging adults, and then till the last stage of life. We look at the trajectory of the changes and growth and development. And that is all for this chapter. And now, please take the Week 2 quiz to complete this module. And you will have 30 minutes to do this quiz. And after you complete the quiz, you can move on to the next module, which is learning and memory. In the next chapter, we will be looking at 3 types of learning, including classical conditioning, operant conditioning, and observational learning. And then we will also look at the 3 processes in memory, including encoding, storage, and retrieval. So that is all for this chapter, and thank you for watching this video.